I got
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Okay,
Brian.
he's the man. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
All
Vice
right.
Chair.
You know, it's my job, man.
It's nice to be wanted and have a
Yeah,
job to do.
that's right.
I have a purpose.
Yeah. So anyways, it's Friday and it's good to start off with a smile. It's Friday, January 12th. This is a committee meeting of the Agricultural Committee. And we have Steve Dwinell with us from the Agency of Agriculture and Margaret Griffin. And we which were in earlier this week, but we ran out of time, I guess, or cut short, and which is the story of my life. Always being a dollar late, and a day late, and a dollar short. But anyways, welcome back, and we have a couple of guests with us.
Hey, Rob.
Right. Representative Robin Santangerman.
Emma Schuldeis with William Schuldeis and Associates.
And Linda Lehman was our sister. Yeah, that's where. Got that?
Yes, sir.
Don't get in trouble.
Wouldn't think of it.
So anyways, to pick up where we left off the other day in regards to our bees and in the innovation board, maybe we could, I'll turn the floor over to you to pick up from where we left off.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator. Yeah, so for the record, Steve Dwinell, Vermont Agency of Agriculture Food Markets and Morgan Griffin, Agriculture Food Market. So where we ended the last time was on what was happening in Ontario and Quebec. And then the question came about diamide insecticides, so we got some information about that, which we brought to you, and then also about what's happening in New York. So those are the topics we were going to cover this morning, and of course, any questions anybody has. So just on the, so this is what the board, again, this is what the board was considering when it developed the recommendations to the secretary about BMPs for approval of use of neonicotinoid treated seeds. So in Ontario, they've adopted a system where they require growers to obtain an IPM certification, which is a training program. They have to do it once, and it doesn't expire. And then they have to obtain a pest assessment report, which is a formalized scouting report, again, one time with no expiration, to gain access to neonicotinoid treated seeds on the entire farm property. Our understanding is, and we had folks from Ontario, at least one person from Ontario, that talked to the board, that resulted in some resource constraints on farmers and what are, the technical service providers, certified crop, their equivalent of certified crop consultants, for the use of neonicotinoid treated seeds. So they pretty much transitioned to seeds treated with the diamides, which is an alternative to the
Seed treated.
Yeah, so the
What?
diamide, which
yes,
we're going to talk about, is a different insecticide class. So the seeds are still treated, they're just treated with the diamide insecticide instead of the neonicotinoid insecticide. And what we'll talk about in a little bit, there are seeds used in Vermont that have both neonicotinoid treatments and diamides. They're combined on the seed treatment. So that exists now in Vermont and other places in the U.S. Quebec took a more they have more stringent requirements. They require an agronomic justification and a prescription from a certified agronomist. That's valid for 1 year. So essentially every year they have to get an agronomist come out and evaluate their property, give them a prescription for the use of neonicotinoid treated seeds. And that had even a bigger impact on the availability or the ability of the growers to use those seeds. And so our understanding there is they transition to either not untreated seeds or to diamide treated seeds. And we're actually trying to nail that down. We haven't been successful in getting the percentage, how many folks are using the diamide versus the untreated. We haven't gotten that information. We've requested
Diamide, have you looked into that product to
Yes,
see if
that's
are
what
we
we're
coming to that or?
Yep, that's the next slide.
Because sometimes we have a tendency to change things
Mhm,
in the legislature.
mhm.
And sometimes we've made mistakes. And the new thing we changed to makes it worse than where we were. And I would, I wanna make sure if we're gonna suggest and recommend to the board and to our farmers that we should change. I wanna make sure that the change is positive and not negative.
Is that kind of careful what you wish for?
Yeah, I mean, any of us that have been around here a while have seen that happen.
So that's what we're gonna talk about right now is the diamide, what we know about the diamide insecticides. One thing I should point out is this was a topic that was not really focused on by the board. This is about what the board considered. We're going a little outside of what the board heard, but they did hear some of this information. And we're certainly gonna, our next meeting, we're gonna bring this back up and point out that there were questions about diamides. Probably have a discussion about that too. So just to frame it a little bit, the difference between the neonicotinoid insecticides and the diamides are two different classes of insecticides, so different chemical structures that act on different parts of the metabolism of insects. They both affect the nervous system, but they do it in different ways, which is really, that germane to what we're talking about here. The thing to know is that they're different. From what we understand, the diamide insecticides are more expensive than the neonicotinoids. They are used as seed treatments, and there's two particular products, chlorantraniliprole and cyantraniliprole, two different products that are used as seed treatments. There is another diamide called broflanilinide, which has recently been registered. It is registered in Vermont, and it is used as an in-furrow treatment during planting. If you recall, we were talking about last time about the fact that the reason that neonicotinoid seed treatments have become popular is because they eliminated the need to put an insecticide in the furrow during planting, which has a number of advantages for the grower. So anyway, that's just to be aware of that broflanilinide is, as a seed furrow treatment, is registered. I don't think we have any records of use.
We don't have any reported use we receive usage reports from commercial certified applicators, and so we don't have any reported use of this active ingredient to date. It's
Here or anywhere.
in Vermont. It's only been registered, I believe, since 2021, so it's relatively new chemical.
Right, and the other thing so corn, as far as we know, there is no corn seed treatment in Vermont. The seed treatment's done either in New York or mostly in the Midwest, at facilities there. We do have soybean seed treatment in Vermont. We have at least one facility and one certified applicator that can treat soybeans with a sort of custom blend, whatever the customer wants.
Is that seed treated?
Yeah, seed treatment, right.
Is that the same chemicals in neonicotinoid?
They could use neonicotinoids, or they could apply. The seed treatment that's done in Vermont is done sort of on a custom basis.
I'm just asking, the soy is, your seed treatment is the same as corn?
Can be, but only about, I think it's 30% or so of the soybean seed is actually treated with neonicotinoids.
And the rest of it is just plain seed without treatment?
Well, it's hard for that data point because, so basically corn is treated upstream, right? Manufacturer, everyone gets it already treated. Soybean, it's more apt to be treated downstream. And so that's why that number is, so it's sold untreated, but it might be treated
on the farm.
Either,
Some-
or with, right, like at a dealer or a certified, like a technical service provider like that, so someone who's certified to treat that seed. So the data for soybean shows more untreated soybeans sold into the state.
Part of the only reason I ask is everybody around me is rotating
Yes.
back and forth between soybean and corn now to balance out. And then a little bit, going to a little bit of hay, but it's mostly rotating back and forth between soybean and corn.
Right.
And I hadn't heard you mention soybean.
Good. And the focus has been on corn because that's the largest acreage, and that's the most information we have about what treatments.
See, we had an agronomist in from the extension service, and as you know, we lost a lot of dairy farms,
Mhm.
and they're promoting the idea that we could grow a lot more like soybeans and other kinds of beans on this agricultural land
Mhm.
to keep it active and to keep the farmer that is there, instead of doing dairy, they could possibly do a bean crop of some kind. So if, the thinking, my thinking is if they're gonna be promoting this, we're gonna have more farmers wanting to do this with their land. And if that's the case, we better make sure that, the seeds are good and they're protected from germs and things. But we don't want to lose any more of our pollinators in the process. So your board is gonna have some heavy lifting.
Right, and we'll take that back to the board to start looking at the soybean seed.
Sure. So can you bring us back to the treatment itself? Just remind us what sorts of some of the reasoning for the treatment. What is it that having treated seeds is preventing specifically?
Well, the seed treatments usually are a combination of a fungicide.
Okay.
And an insecticide.
And then the second.
And maybe some other inoculant or some other material that will benefit the germination of the bigger of the plant. The fungicide is obvious, it's to prevent,
Yeah.
So that germination doesn't decay, and the insecticide is used to prevent loss to for corn seed maggot and wireworm are the pests for the corn.
And so corn seed maggot doesn't have a rescue treatment, right? So your only options if you have an infestation that's affecting your germination or your planting rate of your corn is to replant before fire. So there's no rescue treatment that can be applied after.
Right. If the corn seed maggot shows up in your field and it's a high enough concentration, big enough population, you can have significant yield loss, which the board heard a presentation from an agronomist that has recently retired from the state of New York, and that's what he worked on in his career, and he showed examples of losses to the corn seed maggot, when the neonicotinoid seed treatments were not used.
Maybe a quick follow-up. Can you just tell me the prevalence of the maggot in Vermont and then other ways that people sometimes combat it? Is there a way to combat it besides insecticides?
That's one of the things that the board looked at, or the prevalence is, I don't want to say it's unknown, but it's uncertain, probably the best term for it. There are a couple reasons for that. One of the potential, and this is, we talked about last time, the fact that we need more research on that. And also they are doing more research on this now in New York as a result of what's happening in New York. So Cornell is putting a focus on it. One potential reason for the uncertainty about the prevalence is the fact that the neonicotinoid corn seed is so widely used. So in effect, you're suppressing the population just as a matter of the fact that you're using it so frequently. The other factor, which really need to defer to Heather Darby to get into the details, but has to,
She's the one we
yeah, and she's the expert, has to do with the amount of decaying organic matter in the field, which can be a result of the manure spreading, can be a result of the cultural practices. The other factor is
So that creates environments where the maggot
exactly
likes.
They like-
right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and then some of the information that the board heard had to do with planting date. So corn seed maggot is more of a problem early seed, when the seed is taking longer to germinate because the soil temperatures are colder. And you're more likely to get damage at that point because the corn's just not growing fast enough. That's the first generation. Apparently, the first generation of corn seed maggot is the most damaging. So it's all happening about the same time. So one potential way to manage it is to plant later. So don't plant early. So you wait till the soil temperatures get to a certain point, and then you have less of a chance of having the corn seed maggot. The difficulty with that is, and that restricts the amount of time the farmer has to plant corn. If they have a lot of acres they're trying to get over, then everything gets compressed. It also, lessens their chances of having different maturities, planted at different dates to spread their risk for weather conditions and that kind of thing.
Also, if you are dairy, the shorter season is fine if you're feeding it directly to your cows. If what you're doing is selling it on the commercial market and it has to be dry, you want to get something in the ground because they won't be cutting that corn until late October into November and even into December because the corn has to dry down. So you need the longer season if you're going to sell it commercially and sell it to a grain plant that's going, because if you don't do that, then they have to send it someplace to be dried, and it becomes much more expensive to have it dried.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you, that's very helpful, thank you.
have a question.
No, and it would just be helpful to me on the germination. I hear now that we've reached a place where that less than over 97% of everything germinates in the field, partly because of the chemicals that we're using. And it would seem to me that it's not the same seed or anything, but we must have known germination rates before we were using this versus now.
I don't think we know that. I don't know that right
When
now.
the seed dealer comes into a farm, one of the first things they say to the farmer is, the germination rate is this on our product.
Right.
And they compare that versus others.
Right.
And if you have a non-treated seed, and we must have had rates 20 years ago or whenever they didn't use this, but one of the sales points for the salesman that comes into the farmer's yard is, here's my germination rates, because the higher you get those germination rates, the more you make.
The germination rate is a requirement of the seed law. They have to test it.
Yeah.
And report it to the farmer. So that's on the seed bank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Morgan, I'm just curious, you mentioned the rescue path available. If it's a corn maggot that's causing infestation, you're pretty much done. What about the wireworm? Is there a path forward there to cull some of it out and go on, or?
I don't think there's a rescue treatment, but we can find out.
Yeah, we can find out. We didn't hear as much about that, partly because the wireworm does have an economic threshold where you can scout for it, and then you're going to have a problem beforehand. Corn seed maggot is more unpredictable. It's kind of what Steve was trying to say, where it's harder for us to know it's going to be a problem or not. So then once you know it's too late, you're
Right.
Up the creek. But so I think for a wireworm, I don't know right now particular treatment for it, but we didn't hear that as AIB from other people. It was more focused on corn seed maggot not having.
The neonics apparently take care of both.
Yes. So,
Go ahead.
yeah, so I was just gonna talk about a little bit about our seed reporting.
Right.
So we did hear, AIB heard from a representative from the seed industry from Pioneer Seeds, and Steve mentioned that they do have a combination product. So something with the diamide, chlorantraniliprole, and clofandin, so that neonic. So they right now are offering that in the state of a combo, diamide and neonic together on the seed. And our seed reporting has been limited to date. We're working on improving the process for the future years, but right now we know we're not getting reports from all the dealers that are making seeds available in the state, and we also haven't specifically asked for active ingredients used as treatments on the seeds. But when that was reported to us, we can see that yes, there are these combination seeds available in Vermont, so a diamide and neonic, but we didn't receive any reports showing that a diamide only insecticide treated seed has been available in Vermont to date.
I guess I should also add that we're in the process of trying to improve that whole thing. We've got a staff person now who's really focusing on getting good seed reporting and really following up with the seed dealers and distributors. You know, I can't defend really, just the system that we had before wasn't really giving us the information we needed, but now we're trying to get it. So we'll have better information going forward.
And then just to go more into us looking into diamide, so AIB they were curious about this alternative that they heard that the Canadian farmers were switching to. And so one of the members actually found this EPA publication that compares toxicity endpoints of the diamide chemicals and neonic chemicals. So I know it's going to be small up there, but we tried to summarize it in the next slide. But basically on your left, those three columns right here. So are imidacloprid, thiamethoxam, and clofandin, and then the two diamide seed treatments are your farthest columns all the way to the right, the cyantraniliprole and chlorantraniliprole. And basically they're looking at these toxic endpoints. So it's the concentration of the chemical at which on an acute level a certain portion of the population dies, or on a chronic level you see adverse effects. So at these concentration levels. So the higher the number in this chart, the less toxic. The lower the number, the more toxic.
So how did that shake out?
Yeah, so we tried to kind of spell it out for you so you didn't have to go with your finger and kind of compare things. So it's a bunch of, they test it to a different kinds of organisms, right? So for birds, which they look at for treated seed in particular because they're attracted, right? When they're planted, that's an attractant for birds and small mammals. So diamides are similarly to less toxic than the neonics to birds. And then to mammals, they're less toxic than the neonics on an acute basis to mammals. Looking at those concentration levels on chronic toxicity, it's a little more mixed toxicity between the diamides and the neonics. So for example, chlorantraniliprole is less toxic than all three of the neonics, but thiamethoxam, one of the neonics, is less toxic than cyantraniliprole, the other diamide that's untreated seed. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag when looking at chronic toxicity to mammals. For fish, both acute and chronic data suggest that the diamides are more toxic than the neonics. And that in-furrow treatment, that proflanilide, is the most toxic. For aquatic invertebrate data, so this is your aquatic bugs, right? It indicates that in-furrow treatment option, that proflanilide, is generally more toxic than the other chemicals. But looking at the seed treatment with diamides, the chlorantraniliprole and cyantraniliprole, they have a similar toxicity on an acute basis to the neonics. And on a chronic basis, they're slightly less toxic than the neonics to the aquatic invertebrate. And for aquatic and terrestrial plants, basically a generally similar toxicity between the diamides and the neonics. So the big question I saved for last, right, so our pollinators, right? So unfortunately, you can see in this that chlorantraniliprole, it's limited data, right, for honeybees here. So using this EPA publication, we could see that cyantranopol, the seed treatment diamide, has a lower acute and chronic adult toxicity than the neonics. And also that in-furrow treatment, that flannelide, has a similar toxicity on an acute and chronic adult basis. So this is for honeybees only, but it's more toxic than the neonics when comparing the chronic and acute larval toxicity endpoints. And so because this data was limited, we went looking for a little bit more data to give you guys. And so EPA requires this residual time to 25% bee mortality test, and it requires it for chemicals that are asking for registration that show a higher toxicity to pollinators. And so they have to do this extra test. And what they do is the chemical is sprayed on a leaf, so it's sprayed foliar, and then it's aged on that leaf for a certain amount of time, and then a population of pollinators is exposed to that leaf, and they measure how long it takes for 25% mortality of that pollinator population. So the shorter amount of time that it takes to reach 25% mortality, the more toxic. The longer amount of time, the less toxic. So looking at these numbers, so it's RT25 is the number, right? So the time that it takes to reach 25% mortality. Those two diamide seed treatments, chlorantraniliprole and cyantraniliprole, have a similar RT25 to imidacloprid, which is one of the neonics, and they have a shorter RT25, so less time to reach 25% mortality than the thiamethoxam and clofazimide. I do know that you wanted to call out
Yeah, so you go back to that slide. Yes.
the 25.
Yeah, so here's something to think about. And again, this has only been touched on a little bit by the Agricultural Innovation Board, so we're gonna go back and bring this back to the board, let the board think about it some more. But what it boils down to is, like Maury says, kind of a mixed bag when you're comparing the diamides to the neonicotinoids. So for the acute oral exposure, in other words, if the bees were consuming the material in some fashion, the diamides appear to be less toxic than the neonicotinoids
if they
if they're
consume.
consuming it, right? And there are, various routes of exposure for that to occur, but that's one point to consider. But if you look at the exposure to the foliar, the chlorantraniliprole or the diamides are more toxic to the bees than the neonicotinoids. And that's significant if one of the major routes of exposure is the dust that occurs when you're doing planting, like we talked about last time. In the period of time around 2013, 2015, when there were, Canada was finding some bee mortality as a result of planting, the major route of exposure was the dust from the planting. And like we talked about last time, they changed the way the seeds are produced, so there should be less dust. So that might be a less important route of exposure, but that's one of the things we need to do research on to find out if that's changed.
What about, is there dust from the planters that use diamide?
Yeah, you would expect the same,
dust?
yeah, it should be the same mechanism. And like this particular data point shows that could be more toxic to the bees than the neonicotinoids, but when it comes to exposure through, so one of the characteristics of this class of chemicals is they're systemic, they're water soluble, they get taken up by the plant. And like we talked about last time, you can find residues in pollen, you can find residues in the plants themselves, in the vegetation fluid from corn, which could be a route of exposure. So, the point is it's not clear cut, and we have to, sort of sort out what's the better option here.
The diamide in the silver ball.
It is not the silver conclusion. I would draw,
Sounds like to a layman.
But again, we're going to bring this back to the board, and the board will, have to think
But
about
if
it.
that seed is only been around a few years, this chemical, dynamite.
Yeah, I think it's, and I have to go back and look, it is a more recent class of insecticides than the neonicotinoid that's been around since the 1990s. This is a more recent class. But, one of the things that we're going to recommend to the board is that we go and get some more information about what's happening in Canada. Because Canada apparently is using a lot of the diamides, and we need to look at what's happening there in terms of the impact.
So just so I back up and clear, because most of this been going on seed dealers on websites here. Is it just soybean and corn? Or, for example, somebody that's selling, there's people selling sunflower, you have alfalfa and all of your grasses, and are they treated with this too?
Some of them are, yeah.
But it seems like the big issue is to get the seed from the hopper on the planter to the ground without creating a lot of dust. And I should think with all of our engineers that we have floating around the world, that they could figure out a way to get the seed from the planter into the ground without creating a lot of dust.
So the AIB did hear a few presentations about that, and there's a lot of research coming out of Ontario about planter modifications to basically to capture that dust. And so it involves filtering your air intake and filtering your exhaust. And Heather looked into it for her field days this summer, really wanted to have an example of one of their planters modified, and she could not find anything available to do any of these types of modifications onto her planters. So the AIB heard this and heard that it's possible, but it might not be a practical or feasible option at this time for growers. And that's basically what the AIB, after considering the information that they heard, that it's possible, but it wasn't feasible or practical right now. Is that accurate, Steve?
I would, yeah, and then the other type of planter, other than the vacuum planter, I can't remember the exact term, but basically it's a mechanical planter that separates the seeds, and the mechanical planters can be typically use some type of seed lubricant, talc or graphite, or the 2 or 3 commercially available products. And in Canada, I think it's federally, right? They have prohibited the use of talc and graphite during planting, just to eliminate the dust from the talc and graphite, because it itself creates dust. But again, going back to the information we got, that the seed coatings are better than they were 5 years ago, so there should be less dust no matter what. That's why the board made the recommendation to really look into it here, to see what the farmers are getting, see what kind of dust is being generated with their current planting practices, rather than just saying stop using talc and graphite, because we don't really know what the dust generation is from the use of that right now. So that's what we need to find out. During the, I don't know if Evan had a chance to tell you about the UVM webinar series that they did on managing neonics, but during that, the course of that webinar series, which we have a link to, one of the researchers who was one of the original researchers for the corn dust consortium that we talked about, I asked him, I said, well, is dust different now than it was like 7 years ago? He said, as far as he knows, yes, it is, but no research has been done on it. So that's why we need to go back and kind of figure out what's going on with dust generation now with the seed coatings that are available.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. So, you may have already answered this, but when consumers, regular everyday folks, kind of following about Senator Westman's questions about sunflowers, go into the stores, do people know what they're getting in terms of those seed packets? Is there a labeling?
Yeah, there's on the label.
Great. And then secondly, rainfall and all this intense rainfall, how is that going to, of course, I suspect it's going to create more maggots, possibly, maybe more of an environment. And then what's the impact of all this rainfall on even treating plant, anything negative? Well, actually, as I'm thinking aloud, or seeds, it's, you're not treating in any other way, that rainfall would
Well-
impact, intense rainfall would impact things.
This is almost a good segue to the next thing we're gonna talk about, which is the environmental.
Okay, great.
The environmental profile of the products, which is important. And, you know, we've talked about a little bit of AIB, and it is something we wanted to present here.
Yeah, so basically the intense rainfall can lead to more moving off target,
Okay,
right? So right now it's very concentrated, it's on the seed, that's why it's a benefit, it's only on the seed, you're not applying it anywhere else that you don't need it.
Yep.
But still the same thing is that there's, with rainfall, there's some in the environment. Neonics are water soluble, so they're mobile, right? So it leads to more moving off target.
sorry to interrupt, but even if it's not rain, it's still in the environment. If you're eating honey, it's in the honey. If the bee,
No, I don't have any
you're not.
data.
Okay,
We
I
don't
don't
all right,
have any
great.
data
Okay,
on that.
thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so this is going back to that same EPA publication that was provided by an AIB member, and this is just looking at that persistence and mobility within the environment of the diamides compared to the neonics. That top line is the broflanilide, that's that in-furrow treatment option, and that one is less mobile but more persistent than the diamides and the other diamides and the neonics. So you can see the numbers there are the half-life, so that's how many days it takes for half of it to break down under different conditions. So you can see extremely long half-lives there for broflanilide. The diamides seed treatments are pretty much on par as the other neonics for persistence in the environment and mobility. So for example, that chlorantraniliprole has a similar mobility and persistence as clothianidin. And so those are the two main that we're seeing as seed treatments in Vermont right now. And so it's kind of similar as far as how much they're staying in the environment. This gets a little bit, Senator Starr, what you were talking about of how unintended consequences happen, right? So we did hear from Tracy Bowdy, which is basically our counterpart in Ontario. So after their regulations, they're starting to do studies now looking at the risk of both neonics and diamides on non-target organisms. I think that it warrants that these are just in the beginning stages, so we need to keep abreast of these studies as they come. There is one that she was part of looking at efficacy of diamide treated seeds compared to neonic and fungicide only treated seeds. There wasn't a clear yield advantage to the diamide treatment over the fungicide only or the neonic treated seeds, and that gets at what we had mentioned previously this week of there's really inconsistent data for yield advantages for any of these treated seeds. But she did present to the board that there has been detections of diamide in water monitoring studies, with the use of them decreasing in Ontario, and a call out for the need for more studies looking at the diamides. We were talking about bringing this to AIB so that they can tackle this as a potential future topic for them. And then during the webinar series that Heather put on in December, we heard from Cornell, the New York State IPM, that they are initiating a research project that is continually gaining more treatments and more sites within the state of New York, and they're really looking at efficacy of the diamide treated seeds against corn seed maggot. So this is the most relevant research to our neck of the woods, and they're comparing it to neonic treated seeds, fungicide only treated seeds, and also spinosad treated seeds, which spinosad is a organically approved insecticide. So we're really going to keep track of that project as it gets going.
A little bit concerned about New York passed a law banning neonics by 29, I think. But to me, that would be getting the cart before the horse. They should have been doing these studies to figure out that's a good idea or a bad idea, because they can always rescind the law. But once you get something on the books, it's a lot harder to take it off than sometimes it is to put it on. And you'd think, you know, they're full-time legislators over there, pretty bright people. And that they would want to get the study done before they make their decision to ban something, but
Did Cornell University ask, was Cornell involved in this?
We were just gonna talk about later, that was the next topic, actually, was, you know, again, the board was looking at how, you know, the seeds are regulated in other areas. We compared, the only state that has taken action, you know, regulating seed is New York, which the bill that just passed. Of course, Canada, we talked about Canada and Quebec already, or Gary Quebec, but, so at the time we wrote the report, the bill had not been signed by the governor. Okay, so the report that we filed with you guys talks about the bill that was passed by the legislature and provided to the governor for the governor's signature. The governor, and their process is a little different. The governor has the opportunity to send it back with amendments to the which they did. So the governor approved the bill with a number of amendments, and that's what this slide talks about. And we can get you a copy of it if you need it. And then it goes back to the legislature to approve it. But based on the message from the governor about the approval, it appeared everybody was supportive. You know, they had everybody who was interested make a statement saying they supported the changes, so it probably will pass.
Including the farm community.
Including the farm community.
Quebec too, right?
Say again?
Similar in Quebec too.
I'm not sure about Quebec. Don't know. All I know is what happened in New York. You know, so these are the significant amendments for to the bill that was passed. What the bill does is it amends the New York conservation law, and in New York, pesticides are regulated by the Department of Environmental Conservation, not the Department of Agriculture. They work together, but it's an environmental law that regulates pesticides, and the pesticide regulatory program is in the Department of Environmental Conservation. Okay, so it creates a whole new title in their law, Title 11. It does prohibit the use of neonicotinoid treated seeds by January 1st, 2029. But it provides a waiver process for farmers to use this if they have received ICM training similar to what they did in Ontario, and they get a pest risk assessment conducted and a report generated similar to what they did in Quebec. That's good for 2 years. And that will be, how that's going to work will be developed through rules to be adopted by the Department of Environmental Conservation, working with the Commission of Agriculture. So what I foresee happening is they will develop, using the research that Cornell's going to be doing, or is in the middle of doing right now, they'll have some mechanism for evaluating the risk for the pests that the seeds create. And if it's, you know, below a certain amount, then they won't use the seeds. And if it's above a certain amount, then they can still use the neonicotinoid seeds. So I think that's what will happen, or likely to happen, I should say, in New York. That they will, some folks will still be using, if they have a high enough risk, whatever those factors are that Cornell does the research on, they will still be using some neonicotinoid treated seeds in New York. But if it's not a risk, then they won't. And it's going to be real interesting to see. We're going to keep close tabs on that research to see what they come up with. We'll frequently be talking to, I've already been talking to my counterpart over there in New York, the pesticide regulator, about what is going to shake out.
A pest risk assessment.
Right.
That just kind of sounds to me like it isn't going to be free. Somebody's going to pay for that test and that risk assessment. And
potentially, yeah.
I mean, it won't be done by the university, I doubt. I mean, the test itself may be, but the collection and you know, the product and, I mean, it sounds to me like they aren't so sure, so they're putting all these protections in place, and allowing an out. But in the meantime, it's gonna cost somebody, and you know who somebody usually is in agriculture, it's the first, the planter or the farmer, that gets stuck with it, and
But it said that the farming community in New York is supporting this.
The statement from the governor's office
Yeah.
announcing this had statements from the farming community.
All right.
would you like to have a little side job of surveying a few of them over there? You live on the
New York, and it's interesting because there's a huge number of farms right next to us in New York. And the fact that they're supporting this, no, I think that's good news.
Well, if they had a cross-section of users in the testify,
Well, Bobby, I mean, now you're speculating. Now you're going into a little bit of, you know, New York State paranoia, what's happening in there.
If I could make one comment, I mean, this is certainly an area of great interest to our program about how they're doing that. We're gonna find out a lot more about it. We have good connections in New York. We can find out more how this is gonna
That'd be great.
play out and report back to you how we like.
because nobody will know for a couple, 3, 4 years, right?
Well, how it actually plays out, but I think the rulemaking process is gonna start almost immediately. And then that'll be very informative, I think, how that, you know, how they go about, you know, like all rulemaking, taking all the things into consideration to figure out something that
So
works, so.
they will be using, probably mostly, Dynamed seeds then in New York.
Oh, no, that's one of the things we'll have to find out.
But you said the law really doesn't go into effect in 2029.
Right.
So they'll continue, a lot of places are gonna continue the same practices they've done for the next 2 or 3 years.
They all like,
Part of that is what's available through the
Yeah.
seed, because the seed industry is a national
Right.
industry.
The
of
seed
what's
industry is
available.
national, there's only like 1 or 2 regional seed companies out there.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. That brings up a question I had. If I was a New York farmer and I have 100 acres, I plant corn, until the rules are complete and we're ready to go with the new situation, I can continue to use neonics and diamide as much as I want.
that's my understanding.
Since New York is the only state so far that has enacted this legislation, what would I do on January 1st, 2029? Is it possible for me to stockpile neonic seeds? Or could I go to an adjoining state and still purchase them after January 1st, 2029? In other words, what's that farmer gonna do? Is the seed company, or are the seed companies gonna react by providing an alternative for one state?
Well, a couple of points, and again, this is, you know, just somewhat speculation, but maybe informed speculation. The law, the way I read it, prohibits the use of the seed. So
Okay,
you couldn't stockpile it, continue to use
all right.
it, or purchase it from another state. As far as the availability of non-neonicotinoid treated seeds from the seed industry, like I said, there are regional companies, and there are at least one, the big one in New York, who would have the capability of providing non-neonicotinoid treated seeds. New York has about 1 million acres of corn. You know, we have 90,000. So that's a good sized market.
Yeah.
So if there's a demand for non-neonicotinoid, I would imagine people will supply it. The experience they had in Canada was once, you know, the seed companies shifted over and started providing non-neonicotinoid treated seeds to those planters. So those are what, you know, that's what I would speculate would happen.
I would think that if somebody comes up with a better product and a better technology. That whatever New York does, Quebec and Ontario are gonna be right behind. So they're all gonna be using the same technology.
Right.
And there's a lot of corn in southern Ontario.
Right.
And in Quebec.
They can still use dynamite after 2029.
Yeah, the law only addresses neonicotinoids.
And have you talked with your counterparts in regards to the pollinator situation across the lake from us?
Have not.
See, it would, of course, they've been using the same processes as we have.
Mhm.
So but it'd still be interesting to see if they're losing their pollinators at the same rate that we're losing ours.
We can sure look into that. And then the last thing, we'll just talk about where we're going, what the next steps are. So the AIB is continuing to meet. We're going to obviously bring this topic as a new topic for the AIB. And again, the AIB meetings are all public, everything's recorded, and anybody can, watch and have a public comment period. For us, what we're gonna do is take some of these things, some of the recommendations of the AIB regard outreach and education and research. So that's what we're gonna be working with UPM on to start doing that.
Yeah, we hear from the beekeepers about the loss of their bees and is it the neonics that's causing it? Is it the weather? Is it a combination of just our general conditions? But I know, in this building, there's some major concerns about the use of neonics, and fortunately, we in NAG have discussed it now for several years, and it's kind of on our shoulders to make sure we stay as far ahead of the curve as we can on this, but the alternatives haven't been proven out to be much different so far than where we're coming from. And I know Heather, they're working on this all the time up there at the Extension Service, but as we get more and more acres of different beans in the ground and corn in the ground, we want to make sure that we're using the best technology and the best seed and protectors for both the plants as well as our pollinators and waterways and birds. I remember when I was small, helping my dad plant corn, and you'd get a few rows planted, and then damn crows would be in there plucking the corn seeds out almost as fast as you could put them in the ground. And so we treated them with tar oil that they kind of disliked. But it took years to train them not to come and eat the corn seed right out of the ground. So, this isn't anything new. We used to get maybe 20 tons of the acre, and now they're getting 35 tons of the acre. So there's been a lot of improvements along the way. Are there other questions for,
So that was great, very informative.
Appreciate the opportunity.
and, when does the board meet again, in the spring or?
We're meeting monthly.
So we have a meeting right now scheduled for the 22nd and then on the 26th of February.
Yeah, and I would just like to say one thing, we really need to appreciate the efforts of the board members. They put a lot into this.
You said the
Very
last
dedicated
time
and,
they attend the meetings and they're 4-hour meetings and.
yep,
It's great.
and do research on their own and bring it in. I mean, it's been very, impressive how much effort.
Well, you've got good people on that board and that know much more about all this than us, so we're waiting to hear from you.
Well, we'll be back anytime you want us.
Yeah,
Tell you what's.
well, when you have your meetings, or, if you come across something exciting that's new and could help us in any way to do this in a better way, contact Linda or myself or any of the committee, because it is an important issue and we want to do what's best for all.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot for
Thank you both.
all your time.
Yeah, well, thank you again for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Let me check to see if.
Robin, you just interested in this?
Yes. Did you wanna comment, on we had a little visit yesterday.
Yeah,
We got 3 or 4 or 5 minutes.
Come on.
be happy to.
Yeah, slide right up.
Yeah, thank you.
You can actually take the comfy chair.
Yeah, we.
We took these chairs because we both had to sit there, but that's the chair that's supposed to be
I
there.
thought Brian was getting the chair for the rep and we walked right by. Not very polite of him.
Thank you.
So welcome.
Thank you. Very well, thanks. For the record, Representative Robin Chestnut. And the chair and I did have a little discussion over lunch yesterday. I'm here because I'm in-house sponsoring a bill based on New York's bill following the same timelines. When I wrote mine, it was written as 2027 because that's what the New York bill said. It will be amended to follow New York's guideline. I appreciate the work of the board, and it was really informative being here today, hearing this. So it's great. I've been, looking at mostly research from the Cornell lab, and following the same kinds of information about yields and different pesticides. And it's not a clear-cut issue. I think the one thing that I would urge the committee to keep in mind is when we talk about pollinators, it's not just honeybees. Honeybees are a very narrow slice of pollinators. And so using honeybee populations or colony strength as an indicator of pollinator health is potentially misleading. I'm not saying it is, but it's a small slice of the pollinators. New York has over 300 varieties of bees. Vermont has over 300 varieties of bees alone. New York has over 400 species, plus all the other insects, birds, moths, butterflies. And so there's a vast array of pollinators to consider beyond honeybees. The other figure that I would have brought up today, but you mentioned it already, is New York has 1 million acres of population of corn.
1 million acres.
Yeah. And so that is that is an economic driver for development of both the science of the alternatives, but also the market for them. And that's something that Vermont could never achieve on its own to drive that kind of innovation. So I really welcome the opportunity to, in a sense, partner with New York on this question.
Well, certainly, Cornell is well respected, for their ag innovations. They look into stuff. It surprised me that they hadn't already completed these studies before passing the bill to figure out is this the best way to go or not. Switching from neonates to dynamite. And hopefully we'll get some, our innovation board will come back with some good studies on this to hopefully pave the way to a better way of treating our corn that won't affect the tonnage and some other issue within the growing of the product. They probably, if they have 1 million acres of corn, they probably have got an equal number of bean growers out there as well, soybean and other grains.
I just looked up, Ontario's got 2.3 million acres.
Ontario.
Wow.
Well, I bet Quebec's got quite a few, and they're right close to us.
But I'd also just like to mention that I grew up on a farm in upstate New York. Primarily we raised grapes and sheep, but also a few grape crops.
Where was this?
It was in the Finger Lakes region. And in the 1990s, I was actually a licensed spray applicator in the state of New York for an orchard. It's co-managed an orchard in Granville, New York. It was some personal experience with
You
spray
sprayed
applications.
in Granville?
Yeah.
Probably blew right across onto you guys.
Right.
Probably right on to where I am now. It should be like this the whole time.
Right.
So I just want to say that I bring a farm. I'm not a farmer now. Having nothing to do with it, although I am a beekeeper. So I bring in, a number of perspectives to this, and which provides an insight into the complications of balancing these perspectives.
Well, that's a big issue. There's two sides to every story.
At least two.
Yeah, at least two. Yeah, probably 100 made-up stories on. But anyways, how's your bill doing over?
They haven't. It was just introduced 2 days ago.
Oh, so new this year.
Yes.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that. And as we move forward, we could, if you have an interest in this, or if your side moves forward with it, maybe you can let us know. I meet with Dave usually once a week to talk about how things are going, because what happens there has to come here and vice versa. So,
Right.
at any time you wanna come talk to us about this, feel welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the work that you're doing on this issue, because it really is critical. And part of the perspective, and I think you touched on this when you mentioned that in New York the exemptions would be issued by DEC. And my bill actually provides for the same thing, that exemptions in Vermont would be issued by ANR in consultation with the Department of Ag. And that's really because pollinator health is a larger environmental issue. It affects agriculture and farmers intensely, but it is a widespread, it's part of a much larger ecological balance that is the environment.
Well, any questions for?
What's your bill number so that we can watch for it?
706, I think.
All right,
I would have to look it up.
Okay, thanks.
Might be 709. 70 something.
I know every day we get a stack of House bills,
Yeah, so I'm just trying to flip through the chat.
some of them are only single page.
It's 7:06.
So there's
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Thank you.
I have it written down.
Because you know, that paper dust doesn't help either, if you're looking through the
Right.
bills. It's just that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You know, cutting all those trees to print all those bills that you had, and I bet you could talk to your colleagues.
There was an effort to go paperless a number of sessions ago. See how well that worked.
Yeah, well, thanks
Yeah.
for your time.
Thanks, Rob.
I appreciate the opportunity and we'll definitely stay in touch.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, see you later.
Scott, I haven't seen him.
He is out there, he's right around the corner. If they're just waiting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Well,
Wonder if she needs help finding him.
I wish
Right
they
there.
had those studies done
See him?
sooner. What are you gonna do?
I think there'd be less dust if all this equipment had like a nice Teflon coating, you know, and the seeds could just like slide out of
I
the.
mean, just as if they
And
can't,
the pea pod would be in the ground.
they can't design a way to cut that dust. Good thing, if you can you plant corn in the rain? Yeah, the rain. Morning. Hi. Hi, Alice.
How you doing?
Good morning.
I'm surprised to see
Morning.
you, Senator. How you doing? Oh, good.
A little cold, but
Oh,
it's still are.
Just the proverbial hot seat?
Well,
It
we provide a comfortable chair for the punishment that is about. Well, welcome,
I don't know.
Right.
welcome, I should say, back to Vermont.
Back, yes.
And we'll introduce ourselves and get started, like some.
Sounds great.
Ryan Collmore, I represent the Rutland District.
Irene Renner, and then I think we're in Fairfax.
Brian Campion, Bennington County. See you.
Rich Westman, Whale District.
And I'm Bobby Starr from up north. I represent Orleans County and 4 towns down in Caledonia County. So welcome, Scott, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. And it's basically, Sterling up in my neck of the woods is a very important part of our area, and so I thought we would have you in, familiar with Vermont, spent years at UVM. I
Still a
believe.
flatlander.
And, yeah. And, so you can
Remember, he
give
was
us
born
some.
in Connecticut.
I only can speak for myself, Brian.
Yeah, that's I've tried to erase that. change it to North Troy, Vermont, or Newport, Vermont, where I was born. Oh no, you have to put it where you were actually born. My dad was
That's fine.
down in Simsbury working for a company during the war. Went down
that's
from
interesting.
Troy and he was for, I guess they called it 4F. He didn't qualify to be in the army, so he went down there and I came along. Couldn't you have waited? And I asked him many times, couldn't you have waited until you got back to Troy to start a family?
Couldn't he send his
But anyways, it's good to have you with us, and so if you want to introduce your folks, it would be good. We'll get started.
Well, thank you. I presume some of you know Allison Hooper, the
Yeah,
chair of our
very
board of
well.
trustees.
Everybody?
Her husband Don was here for years with us.
But I said, I've never been down this hall. I went to the code room this morning. I said, what happened to the code room?
Well, you notice they chased us to the end of the building.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, you can get out first.
Yeah. That's a good way to
That's a
think.
good
Yeah.
point. That window, how they try to use it.
And Hannah Rushing is our director of advancement. Hannah has just joined us in the last 7
A week, I think.
week. She's been here forever.
Just about a week under my belt.
Oh, golly. Yeah, well, welcome to.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I think we may have Wendy Koenig on the line. I'm not sure if she is with us, but
India.
she's with us in spirit.
I'm listening. Thank
Hello,
you.
Wendy.
Hi.
David Wendy.
Good to hear your voice. Yes.
Nice to see everybody.
Hi, Wendy. Well, give us an overview of the committee. Well, Brian, you lived in Craftsbury for a few years, right?
I was up on Warrior Hill Road in the Penix. My mother's family's on Erie Road. Yeah. Several cousins in the area still.
Beautiful spot, and you all know I was at UVM for 6-7 years, and I was the dean of the College of Education and Social Services. Did a lot of work with the legislature in that capacity, but also the dean of the College of Nursing and Health Sciences for a stretch. And so again, there are very different policy issues and topics, but an appreciation for Vermont. But I have to tell you that living in Craftsbury and visiting Craftsbury, I have a total new appreciation for the Northeast Kingdom and for Vermont. One of my early tours as dean when I came to UVM in 2015, I was in Brattleboro, and I had a gentleman, very gracious, gave me his time over lunch, and he had a partner with him, and the partner looked at me and said, University of Vermont. And I said, yeah, I was pretty proud of it being the new dean, and he said, it's a great university. I said, that was made all the better because it's located so close to Vermont. And I always figured that it was delivered beautifully.
That's great.
And I really appreciated it at the time, but I have a totally new appreciation for it after living in Craftsbury for 6 months. And in like 6 dog months, I came and we had the floods. And, we were all coming out of COVID, and we're strapped, and then we had.
You had to stay right up on the hill, didn't you?
Well, I discovered that the hill is a strange thing. Water flows uphill in Craftsbury. That's another line on that. It is great to be back, and I came back very, very intentionally for this work and for the vision Allison and the board had crafted over the last several years in particular as we've had to transform what we do at Sterling. Just a little bit of background. I think you all know this, but where Sterling, the parameters of Sterling, we were founded in 1958 as a boys' school. We began offering 2-year degrees in the late 70s and early 80s. We began offering a 4-year degree in the late 90s. We have right now 38 employees, $2.5 million annual budget, paying about $55,000 in local taxes. We have $2.5 million annual payroll. We have a $5.5 million annual budget. We sit on 130 acres in Craftsbury. Our campus is made up of farms, forests, gardens, classrooms, laboratories, a whole host of things that go into a very unique form of education. We also are stewards of the 300-acre Bear Swamp in Wolcott, and that is a research area for us that is used by all of our classes, students, faculty, and visitors alike. We have, as a function of these last few years, we've really focused what we do on one major, environmental studies. We had 4 majors earlier, and we've now collapsed that into one major. Within that major, we have emphases: ecology, sustainable agriculture and food systems, environmental humanities, and outdoor education. So still a lot of choice for students, but no one comes to Sterling that doesn't have a deep interest in the environment and ecology, and a deep interest in work. And I'll come to that in a moment. We recognize, and I know the legislature has been very active in the recognition that the systems that govern life on our planet are being indelibly changed by changes in our climate, and the built world that we as humans know and have constructed over time is under a new form of challenge that we've got to figure out how we adapt to survive that challenge. Our purpose at Sterling is to prepare people to serve and lead in their communities, particularly those communities that are being dramatically affected by climate change. Like, full stop, that's what we do. And you could, even 4 buckets that you could emphasize there, but it's all about service and leadership in communities. It's all about environment. We structured our entire experience at Sterling around that. We have a capacity for about 120 students on campus. That's the number of beds that we have, and it's what our dining services can support over time. We've had an average of about just under 100 students, 98, 99 on average over the last 10 years. Right before the pandemic, we had one of the biggest classes, about 119, 120 students enrolled. There were a number of drivers of that. We picked up some students from Green Mountain College as an example that had closed, but it gave us an artificial bump right before the pandemic that I'm sure, not knowing the pandemic was right around the corner, the people before me probably looked like you were on the board. The people before me probably looked at that and go, we're on a good trajectory. And here we are now. The 35 employees or 38 employees that we have now, we're down from about 55 employees overall. We've done a real scaling back on our enterprise to fit within our budget. I'll talk about that in a moment. I want to disabuse everyone of a myth that I hear around the state that Sterling is really expensive. If you look on the website, yeah, it's shocking, $40,000 sticker price. The reality is that we're comparable. We're actually less than Vermont State colleges when you're all in. You have fellowships and you're paying room and board. It's actually quite affordable for your education. Our graduates go on to be city planners, heads of environmentally oriented not-for-profit groups, land trusts. They start and run small farms. They work with conservation districts. I'm assuming. Bill warned me. You might they work in green business sector. They work in the public schools, and we also have a fair share of people that came with and got that environmental education and went off and did big things and things that don't have anything to do with environment. Working on Wall Street, working in Hollywood, just made the best of what is a true liberal arts experience and carried that forward. We're a neat and unique college, based on just those parameters that I shared with you. But the distinctions are really somewhere else. And I am going to carry us to where we're going. Let me talk a little bit, make sure we have a level set here for a moment. Sterling is one of 10 federally recognized work colleges. And at a work college, you receive work study money. Every student is in the work study program, effectively. And every student has a job on campus. And this is not a job that just is paying students. This is a job that's actually creating a functioning campus. So everyone is contributing meaningfully through labor to the ongoing operations of our community and our environment. Students work on farms, students work in the kitchen, students clean dorms, students give me advice. There are a number of different roles that the students play through the work college, but there are only 10 of these work colleges. They're all pretty small. The biggest one you may know is Berea College, and so that's they stand apart. They also have a gigantic endowment, not only relatively speaking, it's a very big endowment. So the students are actively participating in work and significantly contributing to the production of food and the production of all the activities that carries along each day. The academic programming, when you take classes at Sterling, is all integrated into work with our farms, our gardens, our forests, our draft horse program, our fiber arts studios, our sugar house, our woodworking studios, our blacksmithing shop, our logging shops. I could go on, but you can get the idea.
It's all integrated.
This is the community. Everybody is caring. We're trying to create a circular environment where everything is produced is used.
Goes around, comes around.
This is it. And students are in class 4 days a week. They're in class each morning for 4 hours. And in the afternoon, they're off working on an applied project related to the class they're taking in the morning. Those projects can take place in any of the areas that I described there a moment ago. Then in the evening, they spend a couple hours in the work program, and they come back and they're doing their cleaning or they're preparing for the next day as part of their work program obligation. So this is not your, I think about Bennington experience, and I have great affinity for Bennington, where there's a lot of structure, there's a lot of time designed for reflection. This is very different. You wake up in the morning and you know what? Chickens need to be fed and cows need to be milked, and that stuff, as we all know, I think committee I'm talking to, I'm not talking to the education committee, it has to happen. So that's an important theme in the value of the education we're trying to provide Sterling.
Well, years ago at Vermont Tech, the ag program was basically set up like that. You know, you had certain jobs with students, and you know, whether it was in the orchard working with, you know, the apples or the eggs from the chickens, or the dairy, or putting the milk up, pasteurizing, homogenizing the milk. It was like a work learning school.
And it is in that spirit, Senator Starr, exactly. And that's something we will never lose, because that is the distinction, because the state college, it's hard to run those things. It's expensive to run an operation like that. And it's, it competes with the expectations of a traditional college oftentimes, and accreditation and funding. And what are you doing there? Oh, I'm running a community, very small community, not Suresh running UVM or anything like that. But
you know, that particular issue is more important today than it was 30, 40 years ago, to teach children or young people that, you know, you have this job you signed up for, you have to be there, you have to do it in a timely manner. And I mean, today's young people are a little lax on some of those skills.
I'll listen to that, and I've seen some of that, yeah. But the other part of it is that in a small environment like Sterling, and we will always be small, like scale really matters, okay? We can destroy this by trying to grow our way to revenue and all this. I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. When you don't do the job, you let everybody else in the community down. You know, and that's one of the most destructive features of our learning environment. And that tends to self-regulate pretty readily. You know, bigger environment, you got places to hide, not at Sterling College. We have 2 all-college service days where everybody at the college, from the president to contractors who happen to find themselves on campus that day, are out in the community doing service. So the last service day, we chopped wood for low-income families. We harvested We built screens for winter protection. We worked at the food pantry in Hardwick. We put about across that day, we put about 600 hours into the community. We do one of those in fall. We'll do one of those again a little later in the spring. We also have 2 all-college work days where everything stops and everybody works on, everybody works on a specific project. So it could be painting, could be the last work day we had. It was, you know what? It's spring cleaning day, and we're gonna go into those buildings that have not been touched in 10 years, and we're gonna get rid of all the stuff we've been pack ratting. And so that was a big part of it. Or we're gonna go move fences, for the entire community is gonna go and refence certain parts of our property across the entire day. So the all-college work days, the all-college service days are an important feature of that. Recognition for some of this circular work or all building a sustaining community comes from a group called the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability. This is a national association that you'll hear other colleges and universities talking about. Oh, we have a sustainability, we have 4 stars or a bronze or a platinum green sustainable campus. This is that body. And we're recognized as having, in North America, Canada and the US, the #1 farm-to-table kitchen service. So 30% of what's served in our dining hall comes from our own farms, and about 85% comes from within 50 miles of campus. And they're like, we are, out of 100, we're 100, and I think the next school, I can't remember what it was their score was like 88. So we pegged the top of the chart there, and we're also recognized for our curriculum and environment by that group. We're a tough little place, as you might be hearing here. We're a place that uses, breaks, wears out, repairs, fixes, puts back in use almost everything in our community. You take a drive through Craftsbury Common, you might look at buildings and say, yeah, those look like they've been used and reused and put up wet. And yeah, okay, we're working on that. But the point is that we don't live beyond our means, right? Sure.
Right.
Did I get that line right? We're a scrappy little place, and we operate on a lean margin. We always have. I would like to think we always won't, but we'll still behave like we do. And it's all about reusing and not consuming. That's just the simple thing of how we go about our daily work. We worked our way into a mature phase of a pandemic. We had this big class right before the pandemic hit. Like every other campus, we didn't quite know what we were getting into. We fought the same battles of bringing in classes when everything was locked down and people were reluctant to leave home, leave their communities. And on the back end of that, as we've opened up again, we have smaller classes that came in across 3 years, and we have a big bubble is graduating. So we're in the situation this year, it's the lowest enrollment that Sterling has had. And I can go back and I nitpick this, but I'll go in. We're at our lowest level of enrollment ever. And that's, it's a financial issue. More important, it could be a competence issue, a competence of Sterling. Do people find relevance in this? Are you guys really doing your work well? I assert to you that it is not a competence issue, that we're building this back now very deliberately. With 120 students, the crafting of a class has to be a very deliberate thing because it's really, there's not a lot of room for coming and finding yourself and discovering you want to be like a French literature major, because we just don't have the capacity to take all comers. So we're very selective in how we go about crafting our classes. The work that was done before I came in was actually being done as I was being vetted for this job, was aligning our expenses with predictable revenues. And who knows what predictable is coming out of the pandemic. We're all making our best guesses, but we're doing all right. We redesigned our curriculum to make it more focused and to allow us to deliver it with fewer faculty, quite frankly. This is living within our means, so we redesigned a number of our operations and processes around campus, and we made staffing adjustments that are keeping us living within our revenue in a very hard way. And I've taken to saying that you have to have a balanced budget at a college, and we do. But the budget has to also meet the aspirations of the college's purpose and vision, and we're not there. And so the job now is how do we get from living within our means to where we need to be to responsibly deliver on the future. And I'll have a few words about that in a moment. Steps toward that, we ended all of our programming outside of Vermont. One strategy that was very popular in the teens for all colleges was, let's open up a program in Saskatchewan. I'm making that up, okay? In our case, it was Southwest Arizona. Let's open up a program there because we only have a capacity of X here, and we can build enrollments by having these satellite programs places. And we have a foundation that's going to give us startup money, and big startup money, 7-figure kind of startup money. That's pretty seductive. But it's also, when you're a small place, to stretch and be able to operate all that and manage all that, it's illusory. And many colleges have found that. So what we did is we took this as the opportunity to end all of our external programming and refocus on Craftsbury, refocus on Vermont. Every dollar that we spend is going to be spent in Craftsbury and in Vermont on our alignment with Vermont's identity, and our alignment with the Northeast Kingdom. We'll talk a little bit about that. And I've been made aware that I made the mistake a few weeks ago of saying something like, we really want to be aligned with the Vermont brand. And I had a number of people go, we don't know what that is. And we're actively working on that right now. And I got a story about like red barns and black cows. And whoa, okay. So anyway, there is a unique element of being in Vermont that we want to leverage as part of what we did. And I'll leave it there.
Do you have any students, or are you associated with like Jasper Hill Cheese, any of those local food companies?
Yeah, so we have a number of good partnerships and internships with our local businesses in the kingdom and across Vermont, and I see an expansion of that as we go forward. But those are important pieces.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it sounds like there's a lot of boots on the ground, for lack of a better way to put it. How much virtual learning, online learning is there?
So as you might imagine, the real value and distinction of Sterling is being there. It's the place-based work, it's the experiential work. But there's a whole host of larger issues about sustainable food systems, sustainable agriculture, equities to access to food, and how we deal with things globally, and the things we're dealing with in Vermont, but these are global issues. We received very generous funding from a foundation 4 years ago to start an online program that was tied to several different sites around the planet that are struggling with these same issues. And that has taken off. It was designed initially to, one, speak to these issues that are very important around climate change and equity, but it was also seen as an opportunity to generate revenue and to have more people enrolling in this program. The revenue, again, pandemic's hard to like get your feet underneath you, and so we're at a point now that this has been very successful in terms of attracting people. It hasn't generated a lot of revenue. This year, I told the director of EcoGather is what we call the program. You don't have to listen to this, Madam Chair. Forget about the revenue. Go out and make friends with this program. Reach people across the North Country. Reach people in the Southern Quebec province that are interested in these issues. And let's build a network of friends that we can then draw on for our programming and monetize in the next phase. We just received word that we would have another 3 years of funding for that online program. So I do see that being, and I'm going to show a diagram in a few minutes, not yet, that will locate those online programs within this larger constellation of activity.
Okay, thanks.
Can I just add one thing, Senator? I think that the way we could characterize a typical Sterling College student, for a while, these are kids who had already made the decision that they weren't going to go to college. And then they learned about Sterling and said, hey, I can totally see myself in this space, in this place. And they are oftentimes don't respond to hybrid online learning. And we became a little bit, realistic about it at a point post-pandemic and during the pandemic when every college was rushing to this space. And it has gotten incredibly competitive for us to compete there. So part of our strategic planning is really identifying the things that we do best and running with that. And it's probably not hybrid learning. And maybe I'm making too putting a line in the sand, but
Well, we're working on where that
Yeah.
line is.
I know, I met quite a few of the students over the years, going to Craftsberry and participating in different events, and the students that I met were, they're very special kids, young people, and always enjoyed the limited conversation usually, but always enjoyed visiting with them and, where are you from and what are you doing here and all this. And they were really into it, that's for sure. They wanted to be there. No,
sorry, I didn't mean to.
Irene?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious what type of applications and acceptance rates you have.
We have an acceptance rate in the 90s. You might go, oh, that's not a very selective place. It's how we cultivate the applications. It's a very self-selecting group.
Sounds like it.
And we bring in, this class, our target is 45. That's higher. We normally bring in about 30, about half transfer, half first year. And you need 250 applications for that. If you want to think about it the traditional way, our recruitment effort it's a high contact sport. So this is where I'm reemphasizing now. I've restaffed the admissions office so that we're out in the field actually working one-on-one. It's so small, you can work one-on-one with counselors and students in a set of high schools that are known to have the tendency to send students to Sterling. So it's a different game, but it is high contact.
So you're actually reading the essays instead of allowing a chatbot or something to do it?
Yeah, I think that's the same. Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, we can't afford to pay ChatGPT to read them. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm answering questions willy-nilly without any protocol here. I apologize.
That's fine, we run a very loose committee.
I've been sitting in front of the Wyoming legislature once or twice a month for the last 2 years, and it's a big unwieldy body.
Well, they're probably professionals.
There you go.
We're just amateur.
But we know how to get things done.
Right.
If I may, just one more question.
Sure.
This all sounds very familiar. Were you interviewed by Vermont Business Magazine or some other publication recently that I would have seen?
7 days.
7 days did? Okay,
days.
it's like, I just read about you and you're, okay.
Oh, yeah,
Very
that's
exciting.
That's the guy.
No, it's such a unique school. It's like, I've read about that recently. Okay, thanks.
May I step into the future and how we're going to make all this work?
Sure.
Okay, just a few minutes on really what's ahead for us. Very, very fragile year. Low enrollment, big changes, and this is all by design to bridge to something that is not just sustainable but really vital. And so it's people think, oh, sustaining. I think revitalizing and creating new energy. Sterling is, I've just talked to you for half an hour about the college, Sterling College. And when most people think about Sterling, they think, oh, yeah, it's a tiny college, 120 students, you've got maybe name pieces of it. But we're in fact the learning organization. And I want to recenter the learning part. Sure, we offer 2-year degrees and 4-year degrees. But we also are a about learning. This is why we exist, plain and simple. The importance of that is that if you think about us just as a college, or you think about any place just as a college, you often think about, oh, a baccalaureate degree is 120 units, a course is 3 units, 120 divided by 3 is 40 classes. A class, you have to, this now we're in the weeds, 45-hour contact hours to teach a class under accreditation, and it's this chock-a-block way of thinking. Now, if someone from the small farm economy or the green economy or the outdoor business economy wants to tap something that we do at Sterling, like there's some value that they see, and I say, come to Sterling and take a class in land use management. Farmers can't stop. Like, go take a class. You know, people that are starting new businesses can't stop to go take a class. So the problem that we face is how do we take the knowledge that we work with within our programs that we're expert on, is connected to our place, and break it down into different pieces to be able to rearrange it to provide to people in different areas, whether it's preschool kids that are coming to learn about place-based education with their teachers that have an interest in that, or whether it's a retiree, get that word out. I think I'm longing for retirement. A retiree that wants to come back and take a course in. There's the cheese making course that's kind of infamous. You know, spend 4 days at Sterling and learn how to make cheese and have a great time. You get to spend time with us on the farm. We'll hike. We'll work on projects that are related to things that you're interested in. We'll just keep you distracted from all your day-to-day worries, and you'll pay us a fee to do that. And so the question is, how do you break all this down and then repackage it in ways you can serve different audiences? Maybe see the slide, please. If we focus only on the undergraduate programs, we're always going to be struggling. In the undergraduate programs, that's back one slide, that's Sterling College. There we go, right there. If we focus on only the undergraduate programs, this is a flower, by the way, okay? And there are 5 petals, and there's a pistil in the center there. And the center of that is the learning. So all these things are connected to learning. And we're focused, right now on the bottom petal, the undergraduate programs that we're known for. But it turns out that we actually can serve cradle to grave, literally, with our learning agenda here. So by repackaging things, it allows us to speak to the online group that's interested in sustainable agriculture, food systems, food inequity, regenerative farming, whatever the issues are. The short course programs over on that right pedal, those are the cheese making course, or they may be courses in fiber arts where we're shearing sheep one day, we're spinning wool the next day, and guess what? By the time you leave here, you're in a sweater or rug. And we do that. It's Sterling. We do it really, really well, and we can provide a setting that it would be very attractive to people to come spend time doing those types of things with us. Up in the top left pedal there, the K-12. We've been working with the Vermont Rural Education Collaborative, and my background is in education, and I'm quite familiar with the landscape in Vermont, and there is a lot of press to teachers want to know about place-based and experiential education. Shelburne Farms does a wonderful job with this. We don't want to, we can't compete, we won't compete with Shelburne Farms for a variety of reasons. They do something very different, and they have a set of facilities that are complementary to the facilities that we have at Sterling. So there's the potential for collaboration with places like Shelburne Farms. There's the potential, certainly already, that we're realizing for direct work with districts across the state on agriculture education, on place-based education, experiential education, and on providing a laboratory for students in the North Country. We're partnering now with 10 North Country schools as part of our new admissions regime, and this is an opportunity for our students from those schools to come to our campus with their teachers and their counselors, and spend a day doing the work and living the life of a Sterling student. So that can translate into revenue in important ways. There's federal money for that, there's state money for that, there's philanthropic money for that can subsidize the undergraduate programs that they started with. The biggie is the top right pedal. We really emphasized some new economies, loose quotes around new in Vermont. The green economy, I think of my friend Bill Galfie at Mighty. I use him as kind of the poster child of creating a locally sourced Amazon online system that's really important. They've expressed an interest in how they work with Sterling, how they provide internships, and how they might fund some projects that are important to them and important to us. We have a new small farm economy, but one that we're really focusing on in a different way now as a part of the identity of Vermont. We have graduated a number of small farm entrepreneurs that have gone on to do important things in Vermont, and so we have a constellation of actors out there already, but we also have a lot of knowledge and expertise that could be shared in the proper forum with people who are interested in starting and running small farms. And then partnership with the Vermont Outdoor Business Association and in their membership. This week I was working with Kelly Alt and Tom Cheney from Advanced Vermont on career pathways into the outdoor business industry and how we might provide professional development for defining what those pathways look like and what being able to sustain yourself in a career and professional and vitalized way might entail. I mentioned Bill Manning, and so we've got conservation districts across the state. Many of the conservation districts have expressed an interest in figuring out how we can partner with Sterling College to provide support to conservation districts in terms of labor, but also there are co-learning opportunities that are embedded with that. And I know that this committee has an interest in what goes on in this district in terms of leadership, in terms of substantive activities happening in each of the conservation districts across the state, but that's an important place too. The trick to all this is understanding what each of these sectors needs. So I've been around the block enough times to know that you don't walk in and say, oh, this is what small farmers need. Let me tell you what I got. It never works out well for a particularly higher education institution. So the first thing, and this is what we'll be doing with, preempting Kelly and the Outdoor Business Association here a little bit. So this is foreshadowing some things that they're interested in. Listening. So the membership of VOBA as an example. What do you need? What are your learning needs? What are the biggest concerns that you have? And then we take an inventory of what we have in learning opportunities. And it may not just be learning opportunities. It may be we need a place to get away for 4 days. We want to go to a place in the kingdom. And you have dining services and you have capacity in your residence halls, and we like to come be at a place that has common principles. So there are other auxiliary activities that can come alongside of that. But the key part is the learning part of it. It's all going to be tied to learning. Understanding what constituents in each of these areas need, inventorying what we have, making sure it's in the right form. What we don't have, figuring out how we get it, build it into what we're doing, because that gives us relevance in our undergraduate programs. And then putting it out in a format that can be consumed by people who will pay for it. That's how we create the revenue that sustains an undergraduate program of increasing excellence over time. That's how Sterling College sustains itself while being integrally tied to Vermont and to Craftsbury. Last thing on Craftsbury, I had a friend in town over the holidays, and he said, you know, it's funny, I drive to Craftsbury and I don't know where the college starts and where it ends. And I jokingly said, well, where the building looks a little like it needs some paint and some help, that's where it starts. And when you get to the nice houses on there, then that's where it ends. Because, you know, we've got a lot of deferred maintenance, and to have people come and spend 4 days from Montreal or Quebec and do these things with us or teachers, we've really got to lift ourselves up a little bit for business purposes. More importantly, this is about community. It's about being a good citizen of our community. So how we look to the community, how we model our community is really important. So we're going to be doing a little shoe polishing, hitching up our pants a bit. paintings, steam cleaning. So there'll be I hope when you drive through Craftsbury Common, you'll note an evolution in our appearance. It's kind of a leading model. I'm presenting ourselves well and responsibly.
Well, the community is a special little community. And people do keep their properties good. And I think not everything there is painted white as you. There's never been another. Do they know that there are other colors?
That is not my department, and I'm not messing with that.
No, it looks
Green and white,
special.
I assure you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, may I have 2 more minutes to wrap up?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I hope over the last 40 minutes or so, you've had an appreciation for Sterling's trajectory and where we intend to go with Sterling, and it is a very bright future, and it's a very fragile moment to be certain. Simply put, I see Sterling making great investments in Vermont's future. And while from the outside, we might look like a college, little college in the Northeast Kingdom, I hope that you will over time see us as an economic multiplier in Vermont through the partnerships that you see represented in our flower of learning. Well, I'll come up with the right name for that thing. We'll show you, we'll get the right one. But those are the general ideas and just a sketch of what I see going forward. I appreciate your support. I've appreciated the support of our federal delegation and Northern Borders Regional Commission's generosity and helping us implement some of this work. We're going to get across this thin spot that I'm a Nordic skier. I don't like thin spots. Stick. We're going to get across this, and we're going to get back on the good snow. And I think that we've got a very bright future together. And it's got to be together. Sterling will not stand alone. Sterling will be Vermont. Vermont will be Sterling, because that is our co-developed, co-recognized brand. And thank you for the opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's there's your.
Oh, and those are the way buildings.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You look good.
They do look very good. Yeah, right.
Picture was taken 20 years ago.
Nice.
Sterling, for me, it means a lot to our general economy in our county and in the area. But I wanted the committee members, so you found from Bennington, Rutland, Burlington, even Memorial County touches on with us some, but it's important for people that are not familiar with Sterling to understand the importance of it, and the good work that you do there for the students, and also how well it works in helping our economy in a very rural setting. And you didn't mention it, but I believe that Sterling provides the water for the community from your property, don't you? Or something, they had PVCs or
PFAS.
We do the wells. We provide easements to the wells on the property. I wince because we're dealing with PFAS issues, which is a painful irony in an environmental college that we can't drink our own water. But we found clean water, and we've just created 2 new easements to the clean water. And yes, with that, this is we all support one another.
Yeah. Well, it's the only way we've ever survived in Vermont, I think, is helping each other. And are there other questions for any of the members?
Do you have a mascot?
This we do not have a.
I didn't think you would,
We
but
do
I
not have a mascot. There are a number of anti-college things in Sterling, which is part of the beauty of Sterling.
I figured you wouldn't, but I just wanted to
Mascots are
check.
kind of lightning rods these days.
Yeah.
I understand, I
Yeah.
understand.
Whatever you imagine, right?
That's right.
We'll come up with something that.
I'm thinking your
universal.
flower.
The flower, okay, yeah. We'll work on that.
Well, yeah, we worked, with Allison and the group, last year quite a bit. And hopefully, we'll, get that all ironed out and push forward. But we really, really appreciate the both of you coming down and giving us an overview of the college and what it means really to the students as well as the communities around Craftsbury. So have you got any questions for us?
I have gratitude, Mr. Chairman, and I have an invitation for each of you or all of you together to come to campus and enjoy our national, actually our continental recognition as the finest farm-to-table college dining hall in North America.
That is a pretty good.
It is a pretty good distinction, and you know, like so many places in Vermont, we can't get out of our own way to let people know that. So I started with, come join us for lunch in community. We would love to have you, and we will prioritize a visit by one or all of you. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thanks for your time today. Thank you. Appreciate your interest.
So, Steve, did you have something
Good luck
for
to
us?
you.
I wanted to ask you something, Senator Starr, and I also wanted to introduce Senator Renner to our, well, I'll introduce you all since you invited it. This is Willie Jane Patriot. She's the head of our enforcement, so be very careful. Be cautious about what you say or do.
Okay, sounds good.
This is the wonderful Senate Agriculture Committee.
How come he's out loose?
I'm sorry. I messed up.
You can only do so much.
Okay, right.
Well, nice meeting you.
It's nice
Is
meeting
this
you
a
all.
new job? I mean, have you just been hired on or you been there?
For a couple of years,
Yeah.
so still relatively new.
When did we have that?
You came in last year.
I did, yeah.
Linda.
Oh, thank you, Senator. I did not remember that, but.
Nice to see you again.
Oh, it's next Thursday.
She, I think you had a question about animal fences.
Yes, I do.
She's your person to chat
Excellent.
with.
We should go off.
Yeah.
Have 'em run later
Oh, is it
before
still
we-
on?
We're still live.
Oh, yes, please.
Next Thursday, we're gonna have a meeting with some folks from the agency.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. Are we still on live?
We are.